views is always welcome. You'll find a few announcements listed in your order of service, and we have two others today, Karen and Deborah.
So my announcement was supposed to be in the order of service. You get a live announcement today. After second hour in the library, we'll be having a membership and food, fun, and fellowship meeting. What is food, fun, and fellowship? It's all kinds of fun things we can do outside of the service. So if you are interested and would like to join us, please do.
Good morning. I'm Deborah, and I'm the president of our congregation. And it's my pleasure this morning to announce that we now have two RE directors. For you parents, this is astounding couple who are helping your children. And we just wanted to congratulate them. And if you will, let's do that. Thank you.
Your order of service also tells about next week's service. Should be interesting. It's one of those recorded ones, but listen to this topic: the nervous system under fascism. Now what? Should be good. Should lead to some good discussion, so I hope you'll be here. After the service today, we have refreshments and conversation, followed by second hour small discussion groups. Today, we have four choices. If you're fairly new or would like to learn more about what Unitarian Universalism is all about, you'll meet in the library with Deborah Baker Ryan. What is a UU? Then Ivy in the stage room, which is up the stairs right behind the clock. Tarot cards. Choir practice in the harmony room if you like to sing. Or if you want to talk with Amy about today's topic, speaker circle will be right up front. So everyone is welcome to pick whatever appeals to you. And now the prelude prepares us for the service. Elliot is lighting our chalice this morning. Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the verities and realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of achievement, are but experiences of time. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. And today, well lived, makes yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day. Please stand as you're able for our first hymn, number 22 in your gray hymnal. It's called Dear Weaver of Our Lives' Design, and it may not be familiar to you, so Cecile will play it through once first. Children are welcome to come up to the front. Amy has a story for the time for all ages.
Okay. Are we on? Yes. Okay. So I don't really. We're just going to talk. Okay. The first question is, how long is a second? Do you think? What do you think?
A 360th of an hour.
I have another answer. Forgot? Anybody else want to say? How long is a second? Yeah, that's terrible. Maverick, what do you think? Okay. My little book says a second is a hiccup. So if a second is a hiccup, how long is a minute?
Minute is it's a sneeze.
Sneeze. That's good. That's a big sneeze. So what if I say your mom calls you and you say, I'll be there in just a minute. What does that usually mean? It means like maybe half an hour. Yeah. As long as it's so if a second is a hiccup, how do you so we learned this when I was a kid. We learned how to count seconds. We went 1,000, 2,000, 3, 1,000. Did you ever learn that? Did you ever learn anything else? Yeah. What was the other thing? Mississippi's.
Sheep.
Sheep. One sheep. How about alligator? We're in Florida. How about one alligator, two alligator?
For me, at gymnastics,
Oh, that's good. See, so you're making it part of whatever you're doing. So we also learned that um, if you count, so if you see lightning and then you count the seconds, so you hear the thunder, what does that mean? Well, it's not you have to divide. Yeah, I think you have to divide by 5. That's how many miles away it is. Okay, so what do you think there's a couple of ones that I found that they use in England, which I don't know why they use this in England. 1 elephant, 2 elephant, 3 elephant. That's how they count seconds. So now I'll tell you how long a second really is. You're going to want to know this thing so you remember it. A second is 9,192,631,770 energy oscillations. It's easy. Okay, remember that. Yeah. Okay. So while we're defining things in a different way, how long is a minute? Okay, 60,000 milliseconds. So there's a song, and I know some of you know this song. How many minutes are there in a year? Yay, we know the song. So we don't normally measure a year like that. But maybe we could measure our time in something else, like the song says, and we can measure time in love and time in coffee. Yes. How long does it take to give your mom a kiss? How long does it take to give your dad a hug? Right? Takes you a whole year. Well, you can think about that while you're back there. And think about other ways to express how long something takes other than by just the clock. Okay? Thank you.
The sharing of joys, milestones, and concerns is a tradition in our fellowship. Everyone is welcome to come up to the microphone, drop a glass pebble into the bowl of water silently or while speaking just a few words. We respectfully ask that you limit your remarks to just a sentence or two, leaving time for all who wish to share.
So often we take a little time for some quiet and meditation. So I'm going to read you a poem by Lynn Unger, who is a longtime Unitarian Universalist and retired from doing her UU professional stuff and writes. She always wrote poetry, but now she's writing and has a couple of books out. So this is by Lynn Unger. It's called Time. And after I read it, we'll take a few minutes just to sit and relax and think about it. I wonder how a seed marks time. Tucked into the silent earth, does it scratch a tally on the inside of its husk, numbering the days until spring? Or does everything fade into a passing blur without the dance of bees and the steady tick of sun across the sky? What about the dormant summer grass lying golden under the sun? Is it passive through the drought, or are unseen roots searching thirstily for remembered moisture? I know how the sunflower turns its bright head, oriented through the hours. But what of the birds who are waiting for its seeds, or for whatever it is that sets them on their migratory way? Do they have some internal calendar with days marked in red? Or do they move through a blur of time, forgetting appointments, neglecting obligations, or so lost in the work of the day that dusk goes unnoticed and it is suddenly dark? Are they lost? Or are they simply listening to the earth as it chants, low and slow? Now this, now this, now this.
After our song of dedication, the greeters will take up the offering. Generosity is a spiritual practice. Our fellowship is supported by our pledges and donations. If you're paying your pledge with a check today, please make a note of that in the memo line. For our Share the Plate tradition, we split equally all cash donations and checks not marked as pledges with a local charity. For this last weekend in July, our Share the Plate partner is our own UUFEC food pantry. Bill and Kathy White keep it stocked year round, and our donations help to offset that cost. Please be generous. Amy has our sermon today called The Times of Our Lives.
So someone said I should call it The Days of Our Lives, and then I thought that's probably copyrighted somewhere. So today is the 26th day of the month of July in the year 2026. It's also the 12th day of the month of Av in the year 5786. And the 13th day of the 6th lunar month in the year of the fire horse. It's also the 12th day of the month of Safar in the year 1448. I think it's about a week before Lunasaw. And yes, those who know, it's 97 days until Halloween. I know someone who's counting. Okay. So as a child, and we probably all were, we were taught this thing about the year. And the year was 12 months long. And we learned the names of the months. And we learned that 30 days have September, April, June, and November, and all the rest have 31, except for February alone, which has 28 days clear and 29 in each leap year. And leap year is every 4 years, right? No. But you only know this if you live a really long time. So century years, like the year 2000, are only leap years if they are also divisible by 400. So if you happen to be alive in 1900, it was not a leap year. 2100 won't be a leap year, but I doubt that any of us will still be around. So in case you are, just know that it won't be. The thing we call our calendar, the Gregorian calendar, was a reform of the Julian calendar, which was a solar year, but it didn't have leap things in it, so it wasn't keeping track very well, and the seasons kept slipping back into the months. The Julian calendar was a reform of the old Roman calendar, which was a 10-month lunar calendar and was really getting off. So this is like, because I only like weird things. Did you ever wonder why September, October, November, and December were the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th months, when their names say they should be the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th month? That's because they were named in the old Roman calendar. So this went on, and people noticed that the days were slipping, and mostly it was the Catholic Church, and it had to do with the date for Easter. And I'm not going to go into all of the math because I love the math, but most people don't. So they said, we're going to reform this. So the Gregorian calendar was instituted by papal bull, which is something I think is kind of like an executive order, in 1582 by Pope Gregory XIII. He didn't work out all the math. He had people who did that. This change was initially adopted by the Catholic countries in Europe, because the Protestant countries in Europe thought it was some kind of Catholic conspiracy to take over, like, time. So, but the Gregorian calendar was more accurate. And so countries changed slowly over the next 300 years or so. So a lot of countries would, like, everybody wasn't on the same calendar. Of course, they couldn't get in touch with each other that quickly anyway, so it didn't matter that much. The conversion happened in the British Empire, which in Britain, the British Empire, which included then the American colonies, in 1752. And by that time, The Julian calendar was even more off than it had been in 1582. So the changeover involved getting rid of 11 days. So in 1752, you went to bed on September the 2nd and woke up on September the 14th. And you think changing an hour of time is difficult. So Japan didn't do the switch until 1872, and by then they had to chop out 12 days. And some countries, such as Russia and Greece and Turkey, didn't switch until the early 20th century, so they had to omit 13 days. So this is all very, very interesting, right? And I learned not all of that. Some of this I learned later about the switching over. I did read a couple of mystery stories, English mystery stories, where the mystery, to solve the mystery, you had to know that about the days being missing, that was a large part of the solution of the mystery. So it's very interesting. So all through my years, I learned all those months and everything. But there was like this other calendar running in the background because we're Jewish and we celebrated New Year in the fall, not the 1st of January. So I had like Jewish New Year in the fall, and then I had we never call it Gregorian New Year, like everybody else's New Year in January. And it always seemed to me that the September one was more logical because it's when school started. That was like the new year, right? You should have New Year, and that January the 1st was some like weird, randomly selected day in the middle of nothing significant. So there's some other things about when the dates are on the Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar. Goes from new moon to new moon. And so you have to have some kind of leap to adjust it so that your harvest festival doesn't keep backing up through the year and end up sometime in January eventually. But what they did is leap years occur in a 19-year cycle. So 7 out of every 19 years is a leap year. And instead of adding a day, a month is repeated. So on a Jewish leap year, you have Adar 1 and Adar 2. So who decides what year is the leap year? And back in the old days, there was something called the Sanhedrin, which was the judges. They didn't have rabbis back then, but it was judges and civil leaders and everything. And there was a bunch of them, like as many as 70, who would get together and they made this decision, I guess, along with astronomers and things. So it was kind of like a decision by committee. Can you imagine if we had to depend on our legislature to get together and say, okay, this is going to be a leap year? That's like not going to happen. So now there's another system. It's based on scientific calculation. So in the 19-year cycle, the leap year occurs on the 3rd, 6th, 8th, 11th, 14th, and 17th, and 19th years. And luckily, we have something now called the internet, and I can just look it up. I don't have to keep track of when the leap year is. But that was the other calendar. So I'm working on Gregorian calendar because that's what everybody else did. And then we had the Jewish calendar running in the background. It would move around. And then about 30 years ago, I began my Tai Chi practice. And so I had another calendar because, festivals and New Year's and all kinds of stuff. So the Chinese calendar is also a lunar calendar. So New Year in the Chinese calendar marks the beginning of spring and falls on our Gregorian calendar somewhere between January 21st and February the 20th. And in the Chinese calendar, they also always start on a new moon. the months, and they don't really have names. They just call them the first lunar month and the second lunar month and the third lunar month. And so they do the same thing as on the Jewish calendar, except they count the number of new moons between the 11th month in one year and the 11th month in the following year. And a leap month is stuck in if there are 13 moons from the start of the 11th month to the start of the 11th month in the next year. So then you would have the 13th lunar month. It doesn't have its own name. So that's a whole other thing going on. And again, I don't keep track of this. I go on the internet and somebody sends me a schedule of the chanting festivals, which is new moons and full moons and, you know, the 7th day of the 9th lunar month and stuff like that. And somebody else keeps track of that. I just write it onto my calendar. I don't have any personal experience with the Islamic calendar except that except for knowing people who celebrated Ramadan and noticing that Ramadan is the 9th month of the Islamic calendar, which is also a lunar calendar, that it moved. It wasn't always at the same time of year. It gradually moved back through the year and all the way around. And that's because there is no leap mechanism. It's never adjusted. So it's always the same number of months and it moves back. And this was intentionally done. The Islamic calendar started in 622 with Muhammad's journey from Mecca to Medina. So this year, 2026, is the year 1447 in the Islamic calendar. So it's a lower number. But also, in the year 2030, there will be 2 Ramadans because it's only ever so many months. So there's one in January and one in December. And it was specifically set up not to adjust so that a purely spiritual and religious festival, you had to pay attention to it. It didn't actually have anything to do with a harvest or a springtime or a solstice or anything else. It was purely this to think about doing things and making what we call resolutions. But so it wasn't tied to anything else. So it moves around. So those are the ones. Then we also have like this one, which some people follow, which is the circle of the year. And we all know this one has specifically Gregorian dates on it. Like Yule is the 21st of December, which won't actually always be the case because it's adjusted by when the actual solstice is and things like that. So they will move around a little bit, but it's based on natural movements of celestial bodies. So you're actually following something that's happening, not making up specific days for things. So those people who know me know that, like, so I'm like a math person. So the thing that really fascinates me the most about this is the math of it all. Like, you know, I'm going to sit down and figure out that I'm 75 in the Islamic calendar, but I'm not quite 72 in the Gregorian calendar. Nobody else is going to do that. Okay, but what were we all doing? Not us, people, humans. They saw the moon and they saw the sun, and the sun moved across the sky. It was light, and then it was dark, and it was light again. And sometimes it was lighter for longer, and sometimes it was darker for longer. And it got hot, and it got cold, and all these things were going on. And then they made up stories about why this was happening, you know? There was a god that drove a chariot across the sky, and that was the sun. So if he didn't get up, you were in trouble, right? So as it went on, we devised systems to keep track of all this, and we began to have astronomers, and they watched the moon and the stars and the planets and came up with all kinds of systems. And I know, I understand that in modern times, we have to kind of all go by the same thing most of the time. Amanda makes a schedule. And if she made the schedule in the Chinese calendar, none of us would know when to show up and do something, right? You know, that's what she said. Amanda would say, Amy, you're speaking on the 13th day of the 6th lunar month. I'm like, okay, I can look it up, but it doesn't mean that much. So in order to like cooperate in the world and have community stuff, we kind of have to all do the same thing. So our public and corporate lives, we go along. Most of the countries in the world today use the Gregorian calendar as their civic calendar. Many, like China and all the predominantly Islamic countries, use lunar calendars for holidays and celebrations, but the Gregorian calendar for business. So, you know, we do. So now a brief thought on times and clocks. So last week or the week before, our lovely Congress passed a bill called the Sunshine Protection Act, which is about the most ridiculous name for a law I think I've ever heard. So you all know the old joke about if you cut off a strip from the bottom of a blanket and sew it on the top of a blanket, you don't have a longer blanket, right? So you can't like protect the sunshine. I'm not sure. Anyway, so daylight savings time was first used in the U.S. as a wartime measure for 7 months during World War I in the interest of adding more daylight hours to conserve energy resources. But it didn't add more daylight hours. It just moves the clock. And I don't know how many of you remember this. Permanent daylight saving time was signed into law by President Nixon in January of 1974, which I do remember that. And then President Ford signed a law repealing that in October of 1974 because nobody liked it. Now, my favorite thing is while I was sitting and researching and writing some of this, I was thinking, so what if instead of like moving the clock forward and back, we just said from sunup to sundown is 12 hours, and we changed the length of the hour through the year. So it's always 2 hours. So don't laugh. This is what the Romans did. They didn't have clocks. They had water clocks. But at Rome's latitude, the third hour from sunrise was 44 minutes long at the winter solstice. And at the summer solstice, it was 75 minutes long. So the length of the hour, I was thinking, God, what a glorious thing that would be. Anyway, so, and their water clocks were marked out for different times of the year so they would know what hour it was as the sun moved. But basically, from the 14th century onward, equal length civil hours supplanted unequal ones. And I know you can imagine why. And that's because industrial revolution and people were working in factories and things like that. And everybody had to get there at the same time. We seem to have tied ourselves to industry and commerce and lost touch with the stars and moon and sun and earth. Maybe we could get back there even just a little bit. What if we all took some time to forget all of that and just return to noticing? If you can let the sun and the morning chorus of birds be your alarm clock, it's wonderful. Try to tell time by looking at the sky. Follow the changing of seasons not by the date, but by seed sprouting, plants flowering, fruiting, and then going dormant. I think We might not be so coordinated as we are, but we would all feel much more balanced and possibly learn to care more for our natural environment. And that's all. I have a lot more to talk about if you want to talk in second hour.
Please stand as you're able for our hymn of time and rivers flowing. Oh, that's the wrong one. What is this life? I'm looking, should have put my glasses on. Number 94 in the gray hymnal. And it's another one that we're not too familiar with, so Cecile will play it through first. What is this life? The circles of the planets, the circles of the moon, the circles of the atoms all play a marching tune. And we who would join in can stand aside no longer. Now let us all begin. Please stay seated for the postlude. Thank you all for coming. Please join us in the back for refreshments, conversation, and then second hour groups. See you next week.